You think the workplace is just a place where you show up, grind, and go home? For millions of women in the United States, it's a battlefield. Every single day they walk into offices, hospitals, factories, classrooms, and corporate towers, not just to work, but to fight a silent war against harassment, against humiliation, against being underestimated and disrespected. And here's the ugly truth. Too many people look the other way. Too many leaders ignore it. Too many systems protect the predator instead of the victim. But let me tell you something, change doesn't come from silence. Change doesn't come from waiting for someone else to fix the problem. It comes from calling it out, from reforming the system, from building a culture where no woman has to choose between her paycheck and her dignity. This isn't just about fairness. It's about strength, respect, and refusing to accept a broken reality. So today, we're going deep. We're not sugarcoating. We're facing the raw truth about workplace harassment against women in the USA, and we're talking about the reforms that have to happen. Because if we don't face the pain, we'll never build the power. Every time we talk about workplace harassment, most people want to soften it, polish it, make it sound like some minor inconvenience, as if it's just an uncomfortable joke, a passing comment, or a bad day at the office. But that's the lie we've been telling ourselves, because the reality is raw, it's brutal, and it's happening every single day. In workplaces across the United States, women are being cornered, disrespected, devalued, and silenced. And people pretend it's not that bad, but it is that bad. It's worse than most are willing to admit. And the reason we don't talk about it, honestly, is because the truth hurts. The truth is heavy. It exposes the cracks in the system we want to believe is fair. Think about what it feels like for a woman to walk into her job, not knowing if today she'll be judged by her performance or by the way she looks, not knowing if today she'll be listened to in a meeting or mocked behind her back, not knowing if reporting harassment will lead to justice or retaliation. That constant anxiety eats away at the human spirit, and it doesn't just drain confidence, it breaks down health, focus, and potential. It's a war zone disguised as a workplace. And the people who say it's exaggerated have no idea what it's like to be trapped in silence, because speaking up feels more dangerous than staying quiet. Harassment isn't just about crude comments or inappropriate touches. It's about power. It's about the abuse of authority. It's about people using their positions to manipulate, intimidate, or trap others. It's about creating an environment where fear dictates behavior, where survival becomes more important than growth, where women feel like they have to endure in order to keep their jobs, their careers, their reputations intact. And that's the sickest part of it all. Because it's not just one incident, it's a pattern, it's a culture. It's something that becomes invisible. Because it's so widespread, people start to normalize it. And the system, the one that's supposed to protect victims, often works against them. HR departments that claim to be neutral end up protecting the company, not the employee. Policies exist on paper, but mean nothing when the person in power decides to look the other way. Investigations drag on until victims give up. And predators continue climbing the ladder while the people they've hurt are left behind, burned out, and disillusioned. This is the cycle that keeps repeating because the system is built to sustain itself, not to protect the vulnerable. When you're a woman facing this kind of harassment, you're not just dealing with the immediate pain of the situation, you're carrying the weight of knowing that if you fight back, you may lose everything. And that weight is crushing. It silences voices before they ever speak. It pushes women to question themselves, to doubt their own worth, to ask if they're overreacting, to wonder if they should just tough it out. And that's exactly how the cycle survives. It thrives on self-doubt, on fear, on the idea that speaking out will only make it worse. But the truth is, there's nothing small about this. It's not an inconvenience. It's not just office culture. It's violence in disguise. It's trauma packaged in professionalism. It's exploitation hiding behind a paycheck. And when we minimize it, we're complicit in allowing it to continue. The moment you choose to dismiss someone's story, the moment you choose to say it's not that serious, you become part of the machine that breaks people down. So if we're going to face this, if we're going to be honest about workplace harassment against women in the United States, we need to strip away the excuses. Strip away the soft language. Strip away the idea that it's just something women need to learn to handle. Because it's not their job to endure abuse. It's not their responsibility to tolerate harassment. It's not their burden to carry alone. And until we stop hiding from the truth, we can't even begin to think about change. When we talk about workplace harassment, the focus too often falls on the victim, on what she did or didn't do, on whether she reported it or stayed silent, on how she reacted in the moment. But rarely do we shine the spotlight on the system that makes harassment possible in the first place. The system that shelters predators and punishes those who dare to speak up. And this is where the real problem lives. It's not just about bad individuals, it's about structures that enable them, policies that look good on paper but crumble in practice, leadership that protects its own instead of doing what's right, and a culture that whispers don't make trouble louder than it ever says we've got your back. Every time a predator gets away with harassing a woman at work, it's not because no one knew, it's because people chose not to act. Coworkers who stayed silent because they didn't want to get involved. Managers who ignored complaints because the harasser brought in profits. Executives who decided that reputation mattered more than justice. Every one of these decisions stacks the deck against victims, creating a fortress around abusers. A fortress built out of silence, denial, and fear. And the higher up you go in an organization, the stronger that fortress becomes, because those at the top are the ones with the most to lose. If the truth comes out, HR departments are supposed to be the line of defense, but too often they operate as shields for the company rather than lifelines for employees. They talk about policies, they hand out training sessions, but when a woman comes forward with a real complaint, suddenly the rules change. Suddenly it's about minimizing liability, about managing risk, about making sure the brand stays clean, not about making sure the person is safe. So reports vanish into a black hole of bureaucracy. Investigations stretch out until everyone is exhausted, and by the time a decision is made, the victim has either been pushed out or beaten down into silence, and the predator walks away untouched. The system protects predators, because predators often sit in positions of power. They are supervisors, managers, directors, even CEOs. People with influence, people who control promotions and paychecks, and when the person hurting you is the same person who signs your performance review, the system is already stacked against you. It dares you to speak out, knowing that retaliation will be subtle, insidious, and almost impossible to prove. Maybe you're suddenly left out of meetings, maybe your workload doubles, maybe you're passed over for opportunities, maybe you're labeled as difficult or not a team player, and by the time you realize what's happening, your career is slipping away not because you weren't good enough, but because you dared to challenge the fortress. This is why so many women keep their mouths shut. Not because they're weak, not because they're unwilling to fight, but because they know the system is designed to crush them. And every time one more story is buried, one more predator grows bolder, because the message is clear. You can get away with it. The system has your back. The silence of others will protect you, and the woman you target will carry the shame while you carry on with your career. That's the cycle. That's the pattern. That's the toxic engine that keeps driving harassment forward in workplace after workplace across this country. And let's be real, this system doesn't just happen by accident. It's maintained deliberately. It's fueled by leaders who value profit over people, by cultures that prize loyalty over accountability, by colleagues who convince themselves it's not their problem. It's held together by the idea that speaking up will cost more than staying quiet. And as long as that balance exists, harassment will never disappear, because the cost of justice will always be pushed onto the victim instead of the perpetrator. And as long as organizations are allowed to calculate risk instead of enforce integrity, the cycle won't stop. So when we talk about workplace harassment against women in the USA, we can't just point to individuals. We have to point to the system that sustains them, the rules that bend, the leaders that hide, the institutions that fail, because this isn't about isolated cases. It's about an entire structure built to protect the powerful. And until that structure is dismantled, rebuilt, and held to a higher standard, nothing changes. The same patterns repeat, the same predators thrive, and the same victims are left carrying the weight of a system that was never designed to protect them in the first place. When you talk about reform, most people want easy fixes. They want a new policy, a new training session, a new slogan on the company website, something they can point to and say, look, we're doing the work, but reforms that matter are never comfortable. They are never easy, because real reform means accountability. And accountability means people in power have to lose their protection. It means predators don't get quiet transfers or golden handshakes. It means leadership doesn't get to hide behind PR strategies. It means consequences are real, visible, and lasting, and that's where the resistance always begins. Because accountability threatens comfort, and comfort is what too many organizations value more than justice. Accountability starts with recognizing that policies are useless without enforcement. You can write the most detailed handbook in the world. You can require every employee to click through online training. You can even hang posters about respect and zero tolerance on every wall. But if nothing happens when harassment is reported, then those policies are just decoration. They are wallpaper covering rot, and rot only grows when it's ignored. The difference between a safe workplace and a dangerous one isn't the words in a policy. It's whether people believe those words mean anything when it matters. To push real reform, organizations have to be willing to investigate without bias, to act without fear of lawsuits, to protect the vulnerable instead of the powerful. And that means creating systems where retaliation is impossible, where complaints don't vanish into bureaucracy, where leaders are held responsible for the behavior they allow under their watch. And not just when the headlines demand it, but every single time someone comes forward. Because without that level of consistency, trust collapses. And when trust collapses, silence wins. And when silence wins, harassment thrives. But accountability can't stop at the organizational level. It has to be cultural. It has to live inside the everyday actions of people who witness harassment and choose to speak up. People who stop laughing at degrading jokes. People who refuse to brush off inappropriate comments. People who see the subtle power plays and decide to call them out. Because reforms don't survive if they're only top down. They survive when the culture itself refuses to tolerate the behavior. When people understand that silence makes them complicit. When they see that ignoring harassment is no different than encouraging it. Reforms also have to shift the balance of risk. Because right now the risk always falls on the victim. The risk of being disbelieved, the risk of retaliation, the risk of losing their career, and predators operate with the knowledge that the system protects them. Real reform flips that equation. It makes harassment a career-ending choice for the abuser, not for the abused. It makes leaders understand that if they protect the predator, they're putting their own reputation and future on the line. It makes organizations realize that protecting women isn't optional, it's the standard, and failure to uphold it carries consequences that no amount of PR spin can erase. And let's be honest, this isn't just about rules and penalties, it's about power. And until reforms attack the power dynamics that fuel harassment, the problem will keep resurfacing in new forms when promotions, opportunities, and paychecks are controlled by a handful of people who face no accountability. Harassment will always find a way to grow. Reforms that matter redistribute power. They create transparency. They ensure that no one person can control the future of another without oversight. They make it clear that power is a responsibility, not a weapon, and if you abuse it, you lose it. Every meaningful reform requires courage. Because it's easier to ignore the problem, it's easier to wait until the headlines fade. It's easier to protect the predator if he's profitable. It's easier to let victims walk away quietly than to face the noise of the truth. But easy choices are what built this system in the first place. And if we want change, we can't keep choosing easy. We have to choose hard. We have to choose uncomfortable. We have to choose accountability even when it costs money, reputation, or relationships, because without that, reforms are empty. And empty reforms are worse than no reforms at all. Because they trick people into believing progress is happening when it's not. Real reform is messy. It shakes people. It scares people. It exposes the truth that has been buried. But that's the only way forward. There is no reform without discomfort. There is no reform without sacrifice. There is no reform without accountability that actually changes the balance of power. And until we stop settling for surface-level solutions, harassment will keep thriving in the shadows. And the cost will keep being carried by the women who show up every day, just trying to do their jobs in a system that has never fully had their backs. When we talk about building a culture of respect, dignity, and unbreakable strength, most people think of posters on the wall, motivational slogans in the handbook, or some surface-level team-building exercise. But culture isn't built with words, it's built with actions, with habits, with the daily choices people make when nobody's watching. Culture is the air people breathe inside an organization. It's what's tolerated, what's celebrated, and what's punished. And if disrespect is tolerated even once, it sends the message that respect isn't required. If dignity is stripped away and ignored, it tells everyone that dignity is negotiable, and that's when the culture rots from the inside out. Respect starts with seeing people as human beings, not as objects, not as statistics, not as roles that can be swapped out. It means acknowledging that every person who walks into a workplace has value beyond their output, has a voice that matters, and has a right to exist without fear of harassment. And yet in so many workplaces, respect is treated like a courtesy, something extra, something optional, instead of the foundation that everything else should be built on. But here's the truth. Without respect, there is no trust. Without trust, there is no teamwork. And without teamwork, there is no success. So when leaders allow disrespect to live unchecked, they're not just hurting individuals, they're sabotaging the entire system. Dignity means you don't strip someone of their worth just because you can. It means you don't use power as a weapon to humiliate, intimidate, or silence. It means you don't force people to choose between a paycheck and their self-respect. Dignity isn't about fancy titles or positions. It's about treating every single person, from the entry-level employee to the executive, with the same baseline of humanity. But too often, dignity is the first thing thrown away in toxic workplaces. Because when harassment thrives, dignity dies, and when dignity dies, people stop bringing their full selves to work. They shrink, they hold back, they survive instead of thrive, and an organization that kills dignity kills its own potential. But unbreakable strength, that's something deeper. That's about building people up so they know they don't have to tolerate abuse. It's about giving women the tools, the support, and the environment where they can stand tall and call out what's wrong without fear of retaliation. It's about creating a culture where strength isn't about silence, strength isn't about endurance. Strength is about refusing to accept a broken system as normal. Unbreakable strength is forged in truth. It's forged in action. It's forged in a collective decision that harassment has no place here. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. Building that kind of culture means everyone has to be accountable, not just leadership, not just HR, not just the people who write the policies. It means every employee has to understand that their behavior matters, their silence matters, their courage matters, because culture isn't what one person does. It's what everyone accepts. If people keep their heads down, if they laugh along with the jokes, if they pretend they didn't hear the comment, then they're helping to build a culture of complicity. But if they choose to speak up, if they choose to step in, if they choose to make it clear that harassment isn't acceptable here, then they're helping to build a culture of respect. And the reality is, cultures don't change overnight. They're built brick by brick, action by action, choice by choice. They're built when leaders reward integrity instead of looking away, when coworkers support each other instead of staying silent, when victims are protected instead of punished. Cultures shift when the weight of silence is replaced by the power of collective accountability, when it becomes normal to defend dignity, when it becomes normal to treat respect as non-negotiable, when it becomes normal for strength to mean standing up instead of staying quiet. There will always be resistance. There will always be people who want to protect the old way, who want to cling to power, who want to pretend harassment isn't that big of a deal. But resistance is proof that change is happening. Resistance is proof that the culture is being challenged. And if you're serious about building respect, dignity, and strength, you can't back down when resistance shows up, because that's the moment the culture is tested. That's the moment when people are watching to see if the new values are real or just another set of words on paper. And if you push through that resistance, if you stay consistent, if you keep holding people accountable, then over time the culture shifts from something toxic to something powerful. A culture of respect doesn't just protect women. It elevates everyone. It creates workplaces where people bring their best, where innovation thrives, where loyalty grows because people know they're valued. A culture of dignity ensures that no one has to sacrifice their humanity to succeed. And a culture of unbreakable strength shows predators that their time is over, that silence won't protect them anymore, that the fortress they once hid behind is crumbling brick by brick because a new culture is being built, one that has no room for their abuse, one that makes it clear that harassment is weakness and strength is the power to stop it in its tracks.